Chickadee check, check. Chickadee check one, check two. I don't know why we always say check, 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 check. And we're rolling with another episode of Industry Interviews. I am your host and good buddy, Dan Brown Jr., creative director and composer of the Emmy-nominated CrimeSonics. And today I am joined by ukulele Slayer, first female contributor to Pro Tools expert and the co-owner of Audio for the Arts, the one and only Aubrey Martinovich. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, you can tell I just had my coffee, right?
Yeah. Oh, I just realized I left mine in the other room, but that's okay. I will live.
I can
third or fourth for the day.
I can beatbox if you need.
No, I've left it by my child. If he can drink it, and then he'll have a fun night. It'll be perfect.
Hey, speaking about that little guy, I see this little dude on Facebook with a mohawk. Is that him?
That is him. Yeah.
I love it. We got one guy ourselves. He's not that small anymore. Do you have? I'm just curious. You have just one child or more?
Yeah, just the one. And he is going to be 5 in July. So we had to do the quarantine haircut time. It was just kind of getting really long, and you know what? We're in quarantine. He doesn't have school, so we did a mohawk and dyed it orange, and he's been like rubbing his head ever since. It's really funny.
My son he's almost 13. He's really like 26, but he's almost 13. And right before all this craziness happened, he was growing his hair out, swoopy bang, looking all swaggery, you know. And now this poor kid has like the most glorious mullet you've ever seen.
There's a lot of those going around lately.
Oh, I feel so bad. A lot of mullet. Yeah. And I'm just doing the old slick back, and here we go. All right. So hey, look, I'm curious about all kinds of stuff that's going on in your world. Let me ask you a question. Madison, Wisconsin. Are you from there?
Not originally, but I've lived here the longest. So I went to school here and everything, but I was actually born in Hillsboro, Oregon. Haven't been back since. I moved, I was probably like 2 or 3 years old. It was right after my middle brother was born that we moved to Iowa. And then we moved to New Hampshire and then back to Iowa, and then landed in Wisconsin about 1998.
I want to ask if you are from a military family. What was all the moving around? I'm curious.
You know, that's actually, a lot of people think that, and that is not at all the case. So my mom, basically, I guess I kind of get my like entrepreneurial spirit from her, because she's always like working to better herself and going to school and like applying for jobs and kind of always hustling. Like even if she's in a really comfortable position, she's still always hustling. So for most of that time, she was actually going to school. So while we lived in Iowa, she went to Harvard. So she commuted by airplane, which is like, I have an hour drive, and I can't even like imagine having a longer commute than that. But so she would like fly to Boston to do schooling and stuff every other week, or I don't even remember what the schedule was. I was so young. And then she ended up getting a job in Wisconsin. So for a while, we lived in Iowa, just over the border in Iowa, and she worked up in Madison. So that's kind of how we landed here after crossing the whole northern half of the United States.
It's crazy. We've moved around a lot, maybe not that much. We are originally from St. Louis, so we are Midwest people.
Yeah.
And then we lived in Chicago, and then we moved back to St. Louis. Then we moved to Denver. Then we moved to LA. Then we moved to Tampa, Florida, and then we moved back to LA.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so I think we're going to hang out here for a couple more years. I don't really have to be here anymore, which is good. I don't know. That's a whole other podcast and topic. The mountains and the scenery, like it calls me.
Mm-hmm. I'm like called by the ocean, and I remember like the first time I went to Denver, my best friend lives out there, and I visited her, and she used to work at a Coop studio, so I kind of toured their facility while I was there and everything. And it was the first time I saw mountains in person, and every time I'm just like flabbergasted at like these things actually are real and they exist and they're huge. It's a really cool landscape.
I think my son would say that now about snow, because he has no memories of snow.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and so like he'll make comments like, "Could we take a trip somewhere where there's snow?" And I just change the subject really quick.
Yeah, I mean, man, if you guys ever want some snow, come on up here, and he'll never want to see snow again.
Well, tell me about up there. This, like, it's audio for the arts. I mean, I want to get all into that in a second. It looks like you are the place to be in Madison, Wisconsin. So you live there. You went to school there. Did you go to school after high school? Did you go to school for audio?
Yeah, so I actually, like, right after high school, I kind of knew I always wanted to do music. So while I was in school, I was in all of the choirs I could be in. I was in band, vocal jazz, music theater, kind of everything music in the name of it, I would sign up for.
Yeah.
And so once I graduated, I initially thought I wanted to teach choir. I just really like working with students, not necessarily kids, but like any kind of age group. I really just love education and helping people learn something that's exciting to them, that's exciting for me. So initially I was thinking that, I'm gonna graduate and start teaching choirs and stuff. And I should probably even back up from that, because I took voice lessons as well in high school, and that's really kind of what got me into audio production. Was when I had voice lessons, I would record myself just to make sure the technique is coming across like it should.
Yeah.
And I started kind of falling more in love with that than singing. So I'd be like worrying more about microphone placement than my vowel placement and stuff like that. So I started kind of looking around after high school for music production schools, and there's not really a lot in the Midwest. At the time, there was a place called Madison Media Institute, which has since closed up, which is sad. That is actually where I ended up going to school. But other than that, it's pretty much like Full Sail in Florida or IPR in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So I went to Madison Media Institute, and I was the only girl in all of my classes for the entire program, which was, I mean, I don't know. It is what it is. Like, it was an interesting experience, but it definitely made me like, all right, I gotta work harder than everybody else. I have to know the programs better than everybody else. I have to ask the most insightful questions and stuff like that. So maybe that was a good thing, or maybe that's just my personality. I don't really know. Yeah. So I went for recording and music technology, and that was a 2-year program, and or like 4 semesters is how it was broken down. And I went at night, and at the time I worked retail, so I was working at a department store selling shoes until, from like 9 to 4:30, and then by 5 o'clock I'd be at school and be there until like 10 or 11 at night, and then do it all again the next day.
That's the hashtag hustle, right?
See, I get it from my mom. Like, just always gotta work, gotta be better.
Not to rabbit trail too much, but you hinted at some stuff that I'm interested in. You mentioned that you took vocal lessons, and then you were recording yourself, and you said to make sure the technique was coming across. What do you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, so when you're singing, I mean, we hear this kind of in the studio too, like someone who has never had their voice recorded before. You record a little bit with them, and they come into the control room and listen, and they're like, "Well, is that what I sound like?" It's like the same thing with singing, with talking, with kind of anything. So when you're singing, you're hearing the sounds resonate through your entire body. So the pitch actually sounds just a little bit deeper to you than it does to the audience. So changing that perspective is really valuable in making sure that your pitch is coming across as it should, that all of your diction is coming out. Because if you're doing a lot of opera, that's what I was studying, is these sustained vowel sounds. And if that's like 90% of what you're singing, the diction can get lost really easy, and it's hard to like make sure that the people in the back row are going to hear it. So that's kind of what recording yourself really helps with, is just to make sure that what you think you sound like is actually what you sound like. And if it's not, it helps to highlight the things that you need to change in order to get it to sound how you want it to.
Why do you think some singers sing so loud and they're so focused on volume and not maybe vibration? Like, what's going on there?
I mean, I think, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for me, I've noticed that people kind of think that loud is good, or like that
you can feel it, right? Like,
right, that
digging in,
feeling powerful, and that you're feeling like you're projecting like you really need to, but you know, it's easy to start kind of crossing into shouting territory and not really like a supported sound where your body's involved. And yeah, if that support starts to go, then it gets kind of screechy and more shouty than nice tone, which is what we want.
Yes. And then
Yeah.
you had mentioned holding out the vowel sounds. Let's talk. I know I'm rabbit trailing on this stuff, but
Sure.
I with full disclosure, I have worked with a ton of vocalists over the years, and like getting great vocal performance is something that I am so passionate about. So I just want to talk about this stuff. So this episode gets shared to all my singer friends, right?
Yay.
Let's talk about like musical and consistent vibrato.
Yeah.
And how's the word pronounced? Is it diphthong?
Yeah,
Right?
two vowels that are right next to each other.
Yeah, or the vowel with the consonant, right? Like,
Yeah.
what do you do there, right? What do you do if you have like how do you sing the word fire?
Yeah. Well, I actually just did it out of reflex. You kind of like if you were to sustain the word fire,
Yeah.
I would hold on the like fire and then make the
Yeah.
end of it really quick. Now
Yeah.
it kind of depends on context too, because like musical theater would be very different than maybe something classical, you know, more opera focused would be, because with musical theater you do still like diction is crazy important there, but then you're also playing a character, so you do have to really kind of lean into that. And you know, if the character has an accent or something, you have to communicate that without, you know, messing up your tone too much. So it's something that I'm really fascinated by. I haven't really done a whole lot of musical theater just because I'm really terrible at acting, but I have a lot of friends who did, and I always really liked seeing like how they kind of got into character and how they could use their voice to convey being a different person, and sometimes even on the same piece, like if you have to switch kind of characters midway.
It's interesting to think about, because you're bringing up like musical theater and opera. I start thinking about like all these different stylistic singing, right? Like in like commercial music, you usually soften R's, but if it's country music, the R is so important for the vibe and the dialect. And
Totally.
I think you said it, you hold out the vowel and you snap those consonants, and that helps keep that tone, that open tone. I love a great vocal performance, and I tell you what, I'm a rough producer.
Well, I love, yeah, that's like one of the things I love too, and it's an area I kind of want to get into a little bit more is vocal production.
So fun.
But yeah, I really enjoy it too.
I'll just throw this out there into the ethers of podcast listeners. If in the future, if anyone ever works with us, we are not being mean and we are not being rude. We are just hearing you from a different perspective, and we just want you to sound as good as you can possibly sound. And you know, hashtag for the dollar, right? I'm just being greedy. I want you to make money too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so fun.
Well, and even like beyond that, I want someone who comes in to record something to feel like they gave their best performance, and that I love it when someone comes into the control room and instead of like oh, I sound like that, they're like, oh, I sound like that.
That's so
you
good.
know, like, oh, that's so awesome, you don't even have to do anything. I'll be like, well, there's stuff I already did, and you know, you don't have to worry about it. But I like that kind of happy reaction. That's what I'm always going for.
Let me throw this out there. I'll tell you my stance on this first, and then you tell me if we agree or disagree, and then give me your perspective. Okay, so I'll just throw it all out real quick. In regard to pitch correction, melodyne, stuff like that, there's, you know, that's hot button stuff when it comes to vocalists. Here's where I'm at on this. I really do not care if we have to slap a little melodyne on the vocal to correct, nudge, soften the pitch. I don't really care. Melodyne fixes pitch. It cannot fix vibe. You still have to give a phenomenal vocal performance. But if you just did something that's absolutely incredible on the mic, you came in, spit on the mic, you blew it up, it's amazing, and it's a little sharp, a little flat, dude, we don't have to go back and forth for an hour so you to do it again and again and again. So it's perfect. You've already gotten it. Let's take it. Let's go. Okay, what is your stance on this?
I totally agree. I definitely will tune something if I hear an issue, but I'm always going to choose the best performance over the best tuning.
Right.
Well, maybe not necessarily. Yeah, yeah,
If
probably
it's
always.
tuning, you can't fix the vibe, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm like trying to think of like maybe there's a situation here where I will want to go with I don't know. I always the best performance, like whatever connects the most emotionally is the
Yeah.
thing that is going to end up staying in the track from my
Yeah,
perspective.
absolutely.
Yeah, I do a fair amount of tuning, especially if it's necessary. I've tuned myself before, and that's
Right.
always a special kind of nightmare.
Uh-huh.
Um,
It's never
um,
right, is why, right?
right. I'm like, this
Never.
is always whatever direction it needs to move in. I did a recording for a production expert, a tutorial on how to fake a choir if you're social distancing.
Mm.
So I set up an XY pair and just kind of sang in different positions around the pair of microphones. And I sang this Vivaldi piece, and it's like so exposed, and it's me singing four things. I'm like, I have to tune this before anyone can hear it, because
Uh-huh.
it just has to be right on. I don't know.
So in regard to that, I play a lot of Native American flutes and world flutes, and
Cool.
and I have this one particular flute that my wife found at a flea market, and this peddler at the flea market was using it to prop up a jewelry counter. I mean, this thing was being abused,
Oh,
right? It's a fairly expensive flute,
oh,
so I was like, "Hey, dude, let me throw you some coin. Let me just take this thing. I can't in good conscience walk away from this. This is like,
right. Oh
killing
my
me."
gosh.
So we get it home, and it's scorched by the sun. It has the most wonderful, airy quality,
Hmm.
but the flute is sharp. No matter what you do, this
Oh,
thing has
sure.
shrunk, and it is sharp. I still
Mm.
use it all the time on tracks, and I know that, look, I'm using this flute because of its quality, not because of its pitch, right? So
Right.
I just bring it into Melodyne, pitch everything down, and it's perfectly fine. So
Oh, see, there you go.
yeah, but I love it. So fun, so fun. I know I don't want to rabbit trail on the vocal stuff so much, but I did not know that was in your background, and how cool is that? Well,
Oh, thanks.
you said that you started worrying more about mic placement than your vocal technique. So let's talk about that switch from singer over to studio engineer.
Sure. So I right after so I recorded my vocal lessons to this cassette deck,
Hmm?
and which makes it sound like it was way back in the 70s where I was doing this. No, I'm definitely not that old. This was like 2007, and
I wasn't
uh,
alive in the '70s, if that helps.
me neither. I definitely was not.
No
Born in
joke.
'89.
Oh,
um and yeah, so I was doing that, and yeah, just a lot of roomy kind of sound. I was like, yeah, I mean, looking back, I understand that it was because there's a mic that was placed in the top corner of the opposite side of the room, and I know why now, but at the time I had no idea, and I just wanted to dive into it. So I bought a microphone, it's like a V55 like cage Elvis kind of style looking microphone,
yeah.
with an on and off switch and everything. And I plugged that in through like a series of adapters into my computer's like microphone input, just an 1/8-inch jack,
Yeah.
and was like, why isn't this working? Well, no mic pre or anything. But I didn't know at the time. I'm just like trying to figure it out as I go. So in my research, I start kind of coming across schools and everything, and decide to enroll. And when I first started it, I was totally intimidated. I had never really used a Mac before. I mean, I'd used PC in high school and everything, and was really great at like Microsoft Word, and that was about it.
Yeah.
And we start kind of diving into multi-tracking and using Pro Tools and everything. I'm just like, I am way over my head. And yeah, so I just kind of start staying like extra late at school and trying to learn as much as I can, doing the whole YouTube thing, reading my textbooks, which if anyone has like read a Pro Tools textbook, it is the driest reading ever.
It is.
Especially yeah, if you don't have the software in front of you, because I didn't have it at home, so I was like reading it and trying to remember key commands and like what does this function do and all this kind of stuff. And Eventually I did graduate, and with like a 4.0 the whole time, and
Oh,
it was, yeah, I was really,
oh,
really proud of that, and
yeah.
got certified in Pro Tools, because they actually offered a certification through my school. Had to take like 4 tests, and then out of the 4 I only got 3 questions wrong, so I was really excited about that, and really mad that I didn't get 100% on all of it, because that's how I am. If you haven't figured that out yet, I do everything 100%, or I try to.
Come on. I
Uh,
think on, not to interrupt, on one of
yeah.
the episodes, somebody said, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yes, I heard that. I don't remember which episode. I listened a little bit before we did this, and
Yeah.
I heard that, and that really, that stuck with me too. That is so true. It
Yeah.
really is, because I mean, I've seen, just even looking back at the people I went to school with, like we're all kind of from the Madison area, and I think I'm the only one who's like doing audio production professionally,
Yeah.
out of everyone. And I was the first one to class, last one to leave, sat in the front row the whole time, and a bunch of the other guys would like go out and smoke weed in their car during breaks and then come back in and not be paying attention or anything. And I'm like, I didn't mess around with any of that, so I had a good experience going to school for it. It really helped me out. Otherwise, there's so much to learn if you're starting from scratch like I was.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm scanning through. I know whoever's listening to this episode can't see what I'm looking at, but I'm just going through some of these sweet photos. Okay. So let's talk about this audio for the arts. How did this
Yeah.
start? How did this happen? Talk to me. Like, how did all this come about?
Yeah. So while I was in school, actually, it must have been when I just graduated, I was looking around for internships. And there are a handful of studios in Madison. Like, people don't really think of Madison, Wisconsin as having a very vibrant music community, but we do. And most of the studios in town here deal with hip hop or rock, which is cool, but it's not really what my background was in. And I really wanted to focus on classical music. And I mean, I've grown into other things since then, but that was where I initially started, was wanting to focus on acoustic music. And that's what Audio for the Arts does. So I think I'm trying to remember exactly how it went now, because it's been about 8 years or so. But I searched on their website and didn't really find like any phone numbers or anything like that. Like this was our old website. We've improved it since then considerably.
Yeah, I'm on it
Um,
now, and it's really well done. It looks great.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm like in the middle of doing an update to our website, and
Yeah,
I'm not a web designer at all. So
I
it's
get it.
taking me a while. So hopefully it will be as cool, if not better.
Yeah, I'm on.
Um,
If you can click right across the top to team, and there's Audrey right there. Your whole bio. I love it. Very cool.
cool. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, and so I tried that route first and kind of was at a dead end, and then my one of my advisors at school was like, hey, there's this studio that we're going to place an intern at. There's you and 2 or 3 other people that were interested in sending over there. Just let's get you signed up with an interview. So it was actually, I think, through my advisor, they
Yeah.
reached out to the studio and got me an interview. And I talked with who is now my business partner, Buzz, which is the perfect name for an audio guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he told me that it was like a really easy choice to choose me, because the other people who interviewed were really, really into hip hop and rock, and
Mm.
it's just not our market. And I think that's also why Audio for the Arts has been in business for over 20 years, is that there's not really a lot of like direct competition here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of go a little bit around in circles there, but I came in for an interview, met the team here, was really into it, and I started off as an unpaid intern, and just to make sure I wasn't gonna like blow anything up or make them look bad or anything.
Right.
And yeah, the usual kind of like get your foot in the door type deal. And
Yeah.
one of my first projects I was working on was, they had this folder of sound effects that was all named like audio 1, audio 2, audio 3. So I had to go through all of these sound effects and listen to what they were and name them appropriately.
Mm.
which was a lot of fun and actually kind of sneaky because I had this sound effects library from school that I'd gotten called the Hollywood Edge.
Yeah.
And after a few clicks through their library, I realized it was the same library that I had, and all of my files were named. So I just copied my files to what they had and got rid of all the unnamed files. And because I finished it so quick and like it was done right and everything, they moved me into a paid position and I started doing some PA gigs with them.
That's very cool. So, but look, I'm on your site here, and this says co-owner of audio.
Yeah.
How do you go from unpaid intern, hey, don't blow up something or walk off with our U87, to co-owner? How? Let's flash forward for a second. How did all this happen?
Yeah. So when I first started, there were two owners, Buzz and Steve.
Yeah.
And they've both been really amazing mentors for me, just kind of showing me the ropes of like, you know, giving me my real first kind of real world experience other than just running sound for like friends' bands and stuff during school, which I did sometimes. But yeah, when I first started, I was doing like part-time PA gigs and like remote recording gigs with them. And then I kind of worked my way into working in the studio. And around, I don't know, maybe a year or so after that, my their office manager left. So I had, you know, that Microsoft Office experience. So I started doing the office management. And at the time, I was actually getting my bachelor's in entertainment and media business, also through Madison Media Institute.
Very cool.
And yeah, thank you. And so they were like, help, we need accounting help, and you know, we need marketing help, and we need all this kind of stuff, being, you know, a small business. So I kind of fell into that role. So I was pretty much like half the time engineering, and then the other half was doing bookkeeping, marketing, scheduling, just office-y stuff.
Yeah.
And then about 3.5 years ago, Steve, one of the owners, he got a job as the technical director for Wisconsin Public Radio. And his background is radio. He loves that. That's what he's really passionate about. So when the opportunity for like steady hours and benefits in doing what he absolutely loves came up, he had to go for it. So he did, and that created this power vacuum of which I took advantage. And well, I ended up buying out Steve's share and became like 35% owner. So today, Buzz and I are the co-owners of Audio for the Arts together, and I think we make a really good team. We each have like complementary skill sets. Like Buzz is pretty much squarely in the acoustic music, jazz, classical realm, and I've got a foot in that realm pretty good. And then I also do some like MIDI stuff. So I'm more comfortable with like electronic music than Buzz is. And then we have our associate, Noah, who works here as well. And he does the office stuff for us and engineers about half time. So he kind of has my old position. And he's pretty much the most electronic person of us here. So he's been starting to bring in some of those clients. So we're like a little tripod.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool. And I want to geek out on some gear if we can.
Sure.
Because I'm looking at this dope photo. I think it's the back of your head. And okay, so so I'm just thinking right now about, you know, some other aspiring audio engineer, maybe an aspiring female audio engineer currently in school. Maybe she just graduated and stumbled across this podcast. And like right now, you were like Wonder Woman to her, right? Like you did the gig. You went to school, you killed it, you showed everybody up, you did the thing, you adulthood now, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm still trying to figure out the adulting part.
Well, yeah, well, that's hashtag me too.
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask a bunch of like tips and tricks and stuff in a minute, but let's geek out on gear for a second. But I'm going to pretend like I'm not sitting in a studio for a second. I'm just going to ask questions. So why in the world does everybody have these NS10s or I mean, not NS10s. Why does everybody have these black speakers with white cones in there? What's that all about?
You must mean the Yamaha NS10.
What is that? Why does everyone have those things? Why are those
Because
so
they
expensive?
sound so bad.
Truth.
Yeah, right. We have, let me look here. I think we've got 4 different sets of monitors in our control room.
Yeah.
So the main monitors that we use are the B&W 808s, and those suckers are huge. They weigh about 350 pounds a piece.
Oh,
Yeah, I did not have to move them in here, which I'm very thankful for, but eventually if we ever have to, move to a different location, I'm not looking forward to moving those. But those are on top of just a bunch of cinder blocks right now, because that's kind of what we can have that holds them. And those actually have quite a bit of history. So we got those from Butch Vig, who owned Smart Studios, which was actually just up the street from us here, back, 90s, I believe. And then Smart Studios, of course, is where Nirvana did demos for Nevermind, Garbage recorded there.
because they're from Madison, right?
Exactly. Yes. Well,
that.
yeah, and Butch was the drummer, and he actually went to the university here, which is like 3 blocks east of where I am right now is the campus. So if you're from the area. What was that?
It's just crazy, right? It's just cool to me.
Yeah, I know. It's like, that's what I'm saying. Like, people don't understand how much history there is in Madison for music. It's really incredible. But yeah, he ended up, when they closed Smart Studios and he moved out to LA, he sold us those B&Ws for, I mean, a third of what they're worth, because he's awesome.
And I just Googled how much they're worth. That's a good price.
Yeah. And the power amps and everything to go with it.
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, they had actually 2 pairs of those at Smart, and they had, what we have is this wood panel finish, which is really beautiful. I really like those. And then they had this pair that was painted black. And so Buzz and Steve, when they decided which, pair they were going to take home, they decided they wanted the wood panel ones, which unfortunately for them were kept upstairs. So they had to take them downstairs, load them up, and then get them into the studio here. And these speakers have a dedicated left and right. The tweeters have to be on the outside of the pair. So a guy named Mike Zirkle, who used to work at Audio for the Arts here, but now mostly just mixes out of his home studio. He was helping to direct Buzz and Steve was setting them up. And so they're struggling through the control room carrying the speaker, and they get it on one of these little cinder block tower things that we've built. And they turn around and Mike just has this look of dismay on his face. And he's like, guys, we actually have to switch those because they have the left and right switched on these super heavy speakers. But, man. Yeah.
But why does everyone have the NS10?
The NS10s, yes. I got distracted with the fancy ones. So the NS10s, we have those because they are so mid-rangey. It helps us to figure out if there's any trouble areas in a mix that we're working on that we might have not noticed in other speakers. So I usually start a mix on the B&Ws and then flip to the NS10s just to make sure that there's enough separation between, let's say if I am working with a rock band, the guitars and the bass, because switching to that will really tell you if you've got a muddiness problem. And the fact that if you can make a mix sound good on speakers that just are not good, it means that it'll probably translate pretty well. So in addition to the NS10s, oh man, we've got a pair of Genelecs too, but now I'm blanking on which kind they actually are. So I am sorry, Genelec, if you're listening.
Sorry, Genelec. I can't tell from the photo. Genelec 8040s, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So, funny story. I paid way too much for my NS10s, only because I wanted to find the absolute most mint pair left on this globe. Right. So these things, they look like they just came out of a box from the 80s. It's amazing. So I
Beautiful.
lucked out with those guys. So I was going to ask you, are yours the classic, all beat up, all scratched up and steady, studio sexy?
Ours are classic in the sense that any time the paint has chipped, we've used a Sharpie to fill it in.
Oh yeah, you got to do that, right? I keep a Sharpie right by him. No.
Oh yeah. The Sharpie's not for labeling tape or anything like that. It's purely for the NS10s.
I'm looking at this mic list on your website, and I'm thinking, okay, someone gets out of school, they want to maybe start their own home studio, and they're like, okay, this audio for the arts site, this is cool. Let me, okay, Neumann U87. All right, I'll go pick one of those up, and then they go out online, bam, price tag. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, so that's the real stuff. What do you recommend for someone who's just getting into audio recording at home?
Yeah, I mean, it would depend on what you want to record. If you're wanting to do something that's really versatile, I'd get a microphone that has a pickup pattern that can be changed.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I tend to think that the large diaphragm condensers are the most versatile, just because you can use them for a vocal, you can use them on a violin, you can put them up as room mics, you can, there's a lot of play, whereas like a small diaphragm condenser wouldn't necessarily be as good on a vocal. You'd need a crazy pop filter or windscreen and end up doing more compression in the end. But yeah, I think I would recommend, I mean, yeah, whatever your budget is, a large diaphragm condenser with switchable pickup patterns. If it's got a pad on it, great. Then you can use it as a drum room mic if you're trying to record drums with one mic. And yeah, just a simple interface. Like I've got 2 of the Scarlett 2i2s. I really like those. Just a really good interface you can just throw in your bag and go, and reliable and not scratchy pots. And that's kind of what you need for getting started.
So let's say I take that advice, I go pick up something, I'm happy with the mic, I plug it in, and I'm just not getting the output, I'm just not getting the tone, and I think in my mind I need to buy some sort of preamp. Talk to me about what you would recommend to someone on a budget, good, versatile preamp.
Yeah. Let's.
And this is definitely no pop quiz. I'm just thinking like
Oh yeah.
For the up and comer, maybe new graduate, trying to get them, set up with some good mic, good pre. I'll just throw in here while you're thinking that you should absolutely use Mugami cables, and that is not because I'm an endorsed Mugami artist, that I am, but it's because I really believe in those cables.
Right.
You gotta use them. Don't use those scary cables. That's what I'll call the other ones. You want
just
those
the scary cables.
Yeah, you don't want the scary ones. You don't want those. You want the Mugami.
Yeah, the scary ones make your recording sound like a nightmare. That's why they're called scary ones.
Yeah, you don't want them scary ones. You want those Mugami cables. But yeah, I'm thinking preamp. What's a good pre?
I mean, yeah, they make so many now, and I've been seeing a lot of just little one-channel Neve pre's come up that I really am like kind of drooling over. So I mean, at the studio we use all outboard pre's, and then we have a C24 like control surface, but we don't use those pre's for anything. I'm trying to think of like if I was in an emergency, I don't know. I think I would like pull out our remote recording stuff and just patch some of that in to use more pre's if I needed to.
Yeah, I'm looking at the gear list here too. It says UA 6176 preamp.
Yeah,
I am a big fan of the UA preamps. I'll tell you a real quick story I had though. A friend of mine has a 610 that he all modded with vintage tubes and all this, I don't know, pre-war Russians. I don't know what it all was. He's one of those guys, right? One of those guys.
Yeah.
So he let me borrow it for a weekend, and we were sampling a cabaret piano at the time. And I tell you what, this preamp just absolutely blew my mind. And it's just a 610, but it was his, modified 610. And it was a dual. It was a dual 610. So I swiftly order a 610, like next weekend. I'm buying this thing in. Comes in, bam, left channel, totally out on it. I was so bummed. Send it back.
Oh, really?
Yep, send it back. I was like, don't even worry about repairing that one. Just send me a fresh one. They sent me another one. bam, right channels out. 2 for 2, man.
What?
I know. So
Really?
Universal Audio, I love you, but if you're listening, come on now.
Oh man, I've never had anything like that with it.
I'm telling you, I'm
Jeez.
throwing some shade. I was bummed out. I was bummed out. Now I
Yeah.
want to deal.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh man, that sucks.
All right,
Um,
we can switch a little bit of gears. Can we talk about some plugins? But before we even talk
sure.
about plugins, you said right in school you got right into Pro Tools. Talk to me about that. No Logic for you, no Cubase, no.
I mean, I've used yeah, right. I've used Logic, and yeah, I guess thinking back, like we did have kind of just like an intro to DAW class where we started with Cubase, and this would have been like 2010, 2011. So I'm not sure what version of Cubase or anything like that we would have been on, but
Yeah.
so yeah, it was kind of like an intro to it, just to get the idea of like this is how your tracks are going to look like across the screen. I've used Reason. I really like that. A long time ago, I used to think I wanted to be a composer for children's TV shows,
Very cool.
and I still like I love music in cartoons. I think that I just they're so cool, and I love like how they always have kind of a little classical flair to just tell the story of what's going on screen.
Yeah.
And so I started just kind of watching a lot of Frederator Studios. They do like Adventure Time. I think they did the Powerpuff Girls revamp, but I'm not 100% on that. But I found out that they used Reason for a lot of their music composition. So we had this electronic musicianship class where we studied Reason, and so I was really excited about that.
I'm not gonna sway you either way. K- How do I ask this? I don't want to. I don't want to. Can you hear the difference between digital audio workstations?
I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
Um,
I'm going to tell you, I can absolutely hear the difference between.
yeah.
I absolutely. And I know people are going to think it's some sort of fantasy. It is absolutely not. There is a significant difference from the compositions that come in from, we have writers around all over the world.
Sure.
And I know some of them are in Logic. And when the people are in Logic, it's just the stereo width is never as wide. The tracks never seem just as tall. There's something about Logic that sounds collapsed to me.
I wonder if it's like a different kind of codec or something. I
I have
don't.
no idea, but the only thing I
Huh.
can say, you know how like when you use Melodyne and it just put like
There's like aliasing or something.
well, and maybe I want to say it's like this shellacked gloss that it almost plasticifies the audio.
Huh.
I don't know. I'm
Okay.
telling you, I can absolutely hear it. It's in there.
Interesting.
It is so in
Yeah.
there. But people,
No, see, that's the thing is like I've never, man, I don't even know how you do that short of just like splitting to two totally different machines. But I wonder if there's ever been like an actual A/B test where like someone's taken a microphone and recorded some new material into two
one.
different DAWs and then compared the results.
One of the other things I've noticed is in the fades. In Pro Tools, you have so many different fade options. I'm sure you do
Mm-hmm.
in Logic
Yeah.
as well, but they are very good. And then when I receive content from composers from Logic and they're doing some sort of key command fade, it's there is a chop at the end, and I tell you what, it's subtle, but it never sounds like Pro Tools. It never does.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, if it's just creating something that you have to fix later, that's not cool.
there's like a just don't even worry about fading it out. We'll handle it in mastering rule
Oh,
now because of that.
interesting.
It is wild. Yeah.
Oh,
But I'm not
wow.
crazy.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I'm not crazy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't really deal with Logic a lot, so I'm gonna have to like listen for the plastification of
Yeah, I'm
some
telling you, if
songs
that's not a
there.
word, if it's not a word, we just made it up. We're going to use it.
Boom! It's a word now.
I'm
That's how
telling
words
you,
work.
I'm taking it. I'm going to, what is it, Urban Dictionary,
Right.
plastification, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Copyright that, man.
Done.
Get your licensing like Nashville style.
Can we talk about some of your favorite plugins? Because I always love asking
Sure.
people stuff.
Yeah.
How about, let's go down the list. How about any go-to EQ plugins?
Yeah, I use the Waves Q8 a
Come on
lot.
now. Yeah, Waves is
Yeah,
cool.
of course. I mean, I know that's like the oldest plugin ever in the world, but
That's not
it's
the standard Pro Tools EQ, right?
right. Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, I like that one a lot. 8 bands, everything's easily laid out. I mean, I could use the 10, but I usually just don't really need much more than the 8. And if I do, it's an artistic effect that I want to use probably a different plugin for anyway. But yeah, I start there. I like
Any, go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say the Trident or Silo Sound Labs just came out with a couple of Trident based EQs that I've been playing with and really like as well. Like they add a nice like tone to it. So like they have more of a color than the Q8 does. So I don't use them as often, but I do really like them on vocals a lot too.
Send me a link to that when we're done today, and I'll put a
Yeah.
link to that in the description. I'm not familiar with that one, so that's cool. And then what about a transparent compressor? Not like a color compressor, but what do you use for just simple, gentle compression?
Yeah, let's see. So if man, I have a tendency to use the Waves CLA 76
Oh yeah,
a
I got
lot,
that.
and yeah, and that's not like the most transparent compressor, but I like what it does, and so I find I use that in more of like the singer-songwriting kind of more poppy genres than like classical. I don't think I've ever I'm sure I probably have used
Have you
the
tried?
CLA 76,
Have
but
you tried a compressor called the Glue by Cytomic?
no.
Oh my gosh, I will link it. You have to get it.
Yeah.
I've been using this thing for like, I don't know, maybe a decade or something. Maybe like
Okay.
8 years. And
Uh,
I think it's like an SSL knockoff. And
Oh, sure.
I'll just tell you right now, it's quite possibly the best compressor plugin I've ever heard in my life ever.
Nice.
Yeah,
All
you got
right.
to try it.
Yeah, send it to me.
What about reverbs?
Valhalla Vintage Verb. That is my
Ah, come
favorite.
on, that's my go-to. That's my jam.
Yeah.
That's my jam.
I love it. Oh my gosh. I just so
Yeah.
while we're talking about plugins, this is a funny little thing that I haven't even posted yet, but it's coming out, so I'll feel free to talk about it a little bit. But while I worked retail, I was also a makeup artist at the time.
Very cool.
So makeup and music are like my backgrounds. So I thought it would be funny to create these makeup tutorials that were based on plugins.
Interesting.
So I don't know, maybe it's something that no one will ever watch, but I am amused by it. So I think other people hopefully will be. And so I just did one where I painted my face like auto-tune. And that's the first one I'll post. But I want to do one with Valhalla Vintage Verb and the
Orange and yellows and
yeah. So it's got the three different
right.
upsampling and downsampling settings. So the 70s setting would be like 70s makeup look, and then the 80s would be 80s version.
Purples and blues and pinks.
Purples, and then that's also where I'd be like, all right, this plugin has a 70-second reverb time, so let's do that in our eyeshadow or whatever it is.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
And yeah, it is ridiculous, but yeah, man, 70-second reverb time. Every time I think about that, I'm like, I don't know that I'd ever use that, but maybe I would someday.
But it will probably go viral.
Right, yeah, exactly. But yeah, that is my favorite reverb plugin. So, and it reminded me of the makeup tutorial that I'm about to film, so I had to share.
Multi-band compressor, go.
I like, I like the is it by Waves, the Pro compressor? Or no, the Pro multi-band compressor.
I don't know.
Or is that by Avid?
I know they got a C4. I'm a big Fab Filter guy. I love their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They got pretty good stuff. It's super transparent.
I've got the C4, and I don't know. I think I just wish there was like an extra band maybe or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I found it to be able to like get the detail I want out of it. It always seems to just kind of go too much, and maybe that's just how I'm using it. But I tend to go for the Pro multi-band compressor instead.
That was EQ, compression, multi-band compression, reverb. Who cares about delays? Unless you got some cool trick you can tell me. Any cool delay plugin that I'm not aware of?
Well, Valhalla has a shimmer plugin. It's like this ambient reverb delay thing.
I gotta look into that. That's it. That is cool.
Yeah, I mean, if you do any kind of like sound design, which I do a little bit of,
Yeah.
I just used it for this scene where there are these two characters who they were communicating telepathically. So I just put this on their dialogue, and it was really cool.
And they're so cheap. I'm looking at
I know.
$50. I love these
I
people.
know.
Oh
They're
my,
so good. They're good people. Well, one person, right? I think Valhalla is just one dude.
really? That's so. I need to like become best friends.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I want to be besties. I'll still buy it. I don't ever need free stuff. I always tell people that you don't need to send me anything
Hmm.
free. If I dig it, I'll use it. I'll slap my stuff all over there. I love it.
Oh yeah. And
I love
that helps the community too. Like it's so easy to give away free plugins, but like if you're actually supporting them by paying for it, that's good.
it. Absolutely. All right, I got a question for you. We geeked out on plugins. We geeked out on gear. We geeked out on all things you in your life and how you're like, the coolest girl in the club in Madison, Wisconsin. Obviously, everybody wants to dance at your place. Super cool. How do I even ask this? I'm thinking again about the new grad, and they're looking at you, and you again are their Wonder Woman. You are living the life that they want. That's why they went to school. That's why they went into debt, and they get out, and then they see you, and they're like, "My gosh, she's doing it." Let's talk about
Yeah.
a little bit of advice and maybe some tips. You had mentioned briefly that you felt like while you were in school that you had to ask the more insightful questions. You had to work a little bit harder. Talk to me about that kind of stuff. Like, pretend that you're talking to someone right now who was the younger you. What do you need to tell them?
I mean, just always like do your homework. And that I don't mean that in like the do your assignment and then you turn it in on time and get a grade way. I mean that in the like for example, I just did this week and it's never a good feeling where there's an email thread where someone has sent a script in one of those emails. And then later on you're like, oh, hey, by the way, can I get that script? And they're like, yeah, it's like 6 emails above where we were just talking. So you can look for it. Just like that kind of stuff. Like make sure right away, always do your file transfer right away. If someone gives you a hard drive with data, look at the data that day, make sure there's no problems. Always just look through what you already have before you start kind of reaching out to other people. Like trying to solve the problem a little bit first will help you appear more serious and actually more curious and more ambitious about what you're trying to get to someone who's more experienced. So like if I have an intern here and an intern is asking me, hey, let me try to think of a really good example here. Why is there a light on the piano? What does that flashing light on the piano mean? Well, we have a humidifier in the piano. So if you see that light going off, it needs this much water, this much pad treatment to keep it nice and healthy and in tune for longer, that kind of thing. If they ask me that again the next day, then they're just not listening. They're not internalizing the information I'm trying to tell them. And it might seem like not that big of a deal when it's just, the piano light or, I don't know, a one-off thing here. Yeah. But if it's a pattern, then that's where it's like, it starts to raise some red flags for me. Like this person's not engaged. They don't want to be here is the message I get. So if you are interested in doing something like this, then you kind of have to like become it and live and breathe it. And, don't be afraid to ask stupid questions because it might not actually be something that's stupid, but if you haven't even like done a Google search or something like that before you're writing an email to me asking me like, does a microphone need an XLR cable or a 1/4 inch? Like that's just something you should have Googled.
Yeah.
Just do your homework ahead of time. Like, or if you're gonna have like an artist coming to your studio, or if I've invited you to a session, then Google the people who are gonna be there so that who you're interacting with, just and act appropriately. That's I think that's kind of some of my advice there.
Yeah.
Hopefully that was clear.
Well, I think it is clear. I think what you're saying is care, right? Care
Yeah,
about what the heck you're doing, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like there was an intern who we had here who would like fall asleep sometimes.
Oh my God.
And you know, like I'd be mixing something and then she'd go and sit on the back couch and then fall asleep and then alert everyone after the fact, like, oh, I'm sorry, I just woke up, I didn't mean to fall asleep. And I'm like, well, maybe the person didn't notice that you were sleeping, and if they hadn't, you just told them, you know. Like kind of reading the room.
Yeah, it's funny that you brought, studio couches are notoriously the most comfortable couches.
Yes,
ever.
they are. They
And
are.
so be forewarned, intern, when you sit down, you will want to go night-night.
Yes, yes. And if you do, you can apologize to me privately, because I will notice. I've taken pictures of people sleeping. But don't like wake up and announce it, especially if like there's a client in the room, or if they, just don't, just avoid that whole situation. Talk to me privately.
Yes. I want to share a real quick story about a couch since we brought it up. It's completely random. It has nothing to do with anything we're talking about other than comfy couches. In Chicago, Christmas Eve, huge snowstorm. For whatever reason, I decided to get on Craigslist to find a leather couch. And sure enough, found one, an amazing leather couch. Dude's trying to offload the couch that day because he's moving out $100.
Oh,
I've had this leather couch with me
nice.
for, it's been 11 years now. Still looks brand new.
Oh,
Only point I'm trying to
wow.
make is any intern coming in here is probably going to fall asleep on this couch. It's really comfy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've slept on this couch before too. I get it, but not in a session.
Audioforthearts.com, and you are the co-owner. How cool is this? I didn't ask you about the ukulele slayer thing. Do you really slay the ukulele?
I think I do. I mean, I know there's
You
people better than I am, but I definitely I could play some Mad Blackbird and some stuff. Yeah.
do you have any links you can send me I can add in here?
Oh, I have not actually recorded myself playing ukulele.
If it's not on YouTube, it didn't have it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm always on the other side of the mic, man. I don't know. Someday.
It's shred time. All right, Audrey, I thank you so much for hanging out and geeking out and nerding out about everything and learning all about
Thank you
you.
so much.
It's so much fun. Again, Audio for the Arts, if you are in Madison, Wisconsin, that area, that is the place to go. Check them out. All right, lady, we are out of here.